All right. Keep playing with our time, don't they? So, welcome you this morning, and those who are out there viewing, hopefully the YouTube feed will work fine. We will have heat here before we finish here, so a lot of things happening today, and we're going to talk about that later on. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 19. Starting in verse 9. You know, after the Civil War, probably the best general probably in the whole war is probably Lee, right? Robert E. Lee. But he wasn't offered command of the United States Army after the war. Matter of fact, they took his citizenship away. Now, why did I say that? Well, David in this passage offers command to the enemy general of his entire army. I mean, like what? I mean, these are the type of decisions David makes for personal reasons, and we're going to take a look at that. It's just an amazing thing that's probably unique in history. Okay, you rebelled against us, so the rebellion general, I'm going to make him my commander of the army. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we pick it up here, 2 Samuel chapter 19 and verse 9. 2 Samuel chapter 19 and verse 9. It says, "Now all the people were in a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?" So King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priests, saying, "Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king to his very house? You are my brethren, you're my bone and my flesh. And why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not bone of my bone and of my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if you are not the commander of the army before me, continually in the place of Joab." So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the heart of one man, so that they sent word to the king, "Return, you and all your servants." And then the king returned and came to the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king and to escort the king across the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, who was from Bahurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba and the servant of the house of Saul and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him, and they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household and to do whatever he thought that was good. Now we'll stop there. Why they added the next phrase into this verse, I have no idea. It doesn't fit there. We'll pick it up at the, matter of fact, in your Bible, they might have divided the two. You take a look at that, it doesn't fit. Now Judah had backed Absalom. They backed the loser. And they put all their hopes on him. And Absalom had finessed their way into their hearts of these people, and he made grand promises, typical politician. And since Absalom was dead, so were their hopes. And they had a problem. They rebelled against the king, right? And Absalom is dead, so what are they going to do? Now, the rest of the Israel had mostly stayed with David, and all of David's family was with him. And Judah was now without a leader, but they were also rebels. So what's the king going to do to them because they rebelled? So they're in a quandary. What are we going to do? They can't appoint another one of David's sons because they're with David, you know. And so they're wondering what to do. And some are saying, you know, let's just bring the king back. And others are saying, well, we really can't bring the king back. We don't know what he's going to do if he comes back. And so they're really, as it says in the King James in places, betwixt and between. Don't know quite what to do. And so they'd rebelled. Will David exact retribution? How could we bring David back after we had rejected him? And will there ever be any trust between us? And there were no other candidates to put on the throne. So what is it they're going to do? You know, how's this going to work? Now, some in Judah began to remember the good old days. Well, David, remember, he's the one that led our army against the Philistines and defeated the Philistines. Remember, of all the tribes of Israel, Judah was most impacted by the Philistines because they bordered the Philistines, and said David, you know, defeated the Philistines for us. As a matter of fact, David defeated Goliath, and so what are we doing? Matter of fact, I'm sure some are saying, well, why did we go with Absalom? You know, and so obviously there's some providence there. Remember, God told David that's exactly what's going to happen because of the Bathsheba-Uriah thing. And so what are we going to do? And so David decides he will initiate the conversation. Because the one thing David had to assure the people is I'm not going to come and I'm not going to punish anyone. That's what he's, you know, that's the number one thing. That's their fear, right? David's going to come, he's going to punish him. He said, I'm not going to do that. And so he sends a message to Amasa, their general, asking, why haven't you asked me to return to Jerusalem? The battle's over. Absalom's dead. Why haven't you brought me back? And the other tribes have rallied around me, and they're ready to take me back to Jerusalem. I can't go back to Jerusalem till Judah welcomes me back because Jerusalem's located in Judah. And David said, by the way, I'm one of you guys. I'm from Judah. You know, I am of the house of Judah. I'm descendant of Judah. I'm just like you. I'm your brethren. I mean, why aren't you calling me back? So David asked the priest to go intervene for him. He says to Zadok and to Abiathar, says, go talk to the elders for me. Now remember, Zadok and Abiathar were the ones who were sending messages to David when he was in exile and back. So now he's asking them to be kind of like emissaries or like ambassadors. And David says, why don't you speak to the elders? See, one of the things David wanted to do, instead of retribution, he wanted to bring his kingdom back as quickly as he can, right? We see this after the Civil War, where the radical Republicans wanted to punish the South. So they can't come back in until we what? Until we make sure we get retribution, punish for what they did. And they said, no, we're all one nation, and we're going to break. They're our brethren now. They said they were our enemies, now they're our brethren. And we're going to bring them back in full measure. Lincoln was in favor of bringing them back in full representation and everything else. And this is not going to be solved until the 1877 compromise in the election between Tilden and was it Hayes? Who was that? Hayes. Yeah, Hayes. That's what. Yeah, Benjamin Hayes. So that wasn't solved until then. And so, but when Lincoln was assassinated, it became a problem because Andrew Johnson was not quite the same guy as Lincoln was. And so that's what David's trying to do. He's trying to bring this reconciliation. Now, David sends some incentive, and to me, this is a strange twist in the story. General Amasa, who was the leading general of the rebels, he says, I'm going to make you the head of my army. Wait a minute. That's like making Lee the head of the United States Army after he led the Confederate troops against the Union. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so David offers Amasa the generalship over the entire army in place of Joab. Now, Joab's the one that won the victory, right? It's like a sports team having a coach that just won the Super Bowl for him, say, okay, we're going to fire you, we're going to get somebody else. Well, wait a minute, he's the guy who won for you, right? And so here we have this dynamic here. Even though Joab defeated Amasa, he also killed Absalom. So this is not political, it's what? Yeah, it's personal. This is personal. So he knows he really can't, Joab's very popular. So he knows he can't just execute Joab. So he says, instead, I'll just move him aside. Now, you think Joab's the type of guy that would quietly move aside? There's going to be some dynamics here as we see this interplay. He says, I'll just replace Joab with the enemy general. And so this does get right confusing, doesn't it? Now, Amasa goes from being then the enemy, leading a rebellious army, to being over command of the army he fought against. I don't know of any other situation in history where this has been the case. Can you think of anything? I can't imagine anywhere where you'd say, wow, we just defeated this guy. Let's make him the head of our army. I don't know of anywhere in history that you have a similar case like this. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? And so that's what we have here. He's going to make this enemy general himself. So this is this strange politics afoot, right? Matter of fact, we have a saying, right? Politics makes what? Strange bedfellows. This is kind of strange. But we do have another saying which kind of fits here. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Joab is David's personal enemy. He killed his son, right? He's his personal enemy. So Amasa, even though he was the enemy general, I like him better than my general who killed my son. This is kind of a strange thing. We'll just have time to discuss this later on. So Joab had won the war, but he's out of favor. And Amasa rebelled and lost the war, but now he's favored. And he's offered command. Can you imagine? Okay, you rebelled against me. To reward you, I'm going to make you command over my army. I don't know what level that makes sense, but that's what we got here. So David's now here's something I have to stress this because we see this over and over again. David's personal concerns drive state decisions, and that you can't do that. I think we saw that during the Nixon administration. I think we saw that during the Johnson administration, LBJ. He wants to punish his son's murderer by making the decision for all of Israel, which is counter to Israel's interest. Because if anything that Joab's shown is he's a good general, right? He's defeated all the enemies. Matter of fact, I don't remember a passage in the entire narrative where Joab ever lost a battle or lost a war. Listen, you've got to separate personal and professional interests. You really do. If you're a leader, you got to lay personal interests aside. That's one of the brilliance of Abraham Lincoln. He was able to lay personal slights and personal concerns aside and make state decisions. And that's the same in a company, that's the same in any leadership. You got to lay personal decisions aside. You know, one of the brilliance of Abraham Lincoln was he actually had people in his cabinet who were basically his enemies. And they asked, why did you put Stanton, why did you put Stewart, why did you put these guys in the cabinet? He says, because I need them there. Because I need not only their input, but I also need to be able to help direct their energies so we can win this war. It takes a big man to do that, doesn't it? To take those who are against you, say, but you're still the best guy for the job, even though personally we have a problem. Not many people can rise above that, right? Not many people can lay aside these personal concerns and say, listen, personally we got an issue, but you're still the best person for this job, and I'm going to rely upon you because the country needs this, and it's not about me. David couldn't do that. Or David didn't do that. He made all these decisions based on how it impacted him personally. It's how they got in this trouble to begin with, right? With the war, with Absalom, with all this, it's how they got in trouble. And so separating personal profession. By the way, any of the professions, like being a doctor, right? Or like being a lawyer, if you're going to be a good one, you got to do that. You know, if you get too emotionally involved as a doctor and the patient, stuff like that, you're not going to make good decisions. Same thing in the military. If you're looking at how, you know, I'll give you another example. I don't want to go too far afoot here. Anyway, Max Clark. His job was supposed to be easy. Mark Clark in Italy. He was supposed to go in Italy, Salino, Anzio, quickly cut off the Germans down there. He doesn't do that. He goes in there. They're surprised, but it takes 9 days to unload supplies. And then he was supposed to push Castlereagh back out of Italy. Instead, he wants to capture Rome. For what? Yes, personal glory, right? So instead, he lets Castlereagh regroup, everything else. He doesn't do the job he's supposed to do. He heads towards Rome. He captures Rome on D-Day. You got the headlines. Well, D-Day did. It was a footnote. He said they wouldn't give us glory for a moment. Well, you know, it's not about your glory, General. You know, it's about winning the war. And David couldn't separate that either. David's not about you. Remember the very first thing God told David when he said, anointed him, says, you are to shepherd my people. Well, shepherd's concern can't be on the shepherd, it's on the what? It's on the sheep. So I want to belabor that point a little bit because that is so important in any leadership position. You got to lay personal feelings aside if you're going to be effective as a leader. You got to lay the personal feelings aside. And sometimes that's awful hard to do. It's not what is best for me, it's what is best for the people I'm serving. And so David's appeasement temporarily works here. Judah is relieved that David's not going to come and whack him. He's not going to seek revenge. David's terms are more than generous. I mean, it's almost like, again, rewarded for rebelling. I mean, it's really a super generous reward terms here. And he seeks no retribution at all. He doesn't even hold him to account. He doesn't even admonish him, hey, you shouldn't have done this. He doesn't even do that. And so David realized that Absalom had swayed Judah deceptively, said, okay, let bygones be bygones, going to put this behind us. Judah's elders eagerly accepted terms. Why wouldn't you, right? Eagerly accept these terms. By the way, what other choice did they have but David, right? It wasn't like they had a whole lot of choices, you know, since their guy Absalom was gone. And so they separate this. They come. They're relieved that there's not going to be any penalties. They invite David back. Sure, come back. We're going to greet you with open arms. But I remind us that there's no accountability at all here. I mean, you would think they'd at least sit down with the elders and say, hey, guys, why did you do this? And how can we prevent this from happening again? It acts like it never happens. And if you act like something's never happened, it is eventually going to come back on you, right? This see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil thing. And so you act like it's never happened. And so now there's a triumphant celebratory procession. And Shimei, remember we met him before, he's the one that cursed David when he was exiting Jerusalem. He comes as if, hey, ready for the king, and he brings 1,000 of his buddies from Benjamin, the Benjamites down, and they're greeting, and as if, I've been in your favor of you all the time. Well, Shimei is seeing which way the wind's blowing, right? But Shimei fears revenge. It'll come down the road. It's not over yet. But right now, this is a day of celebration. Ziba's house comes. He's the one that now has been given on Mephibosheth's land. We're going to see that there's a next chapter to write. A ferry boat man goes across the river, brings the royal family back on the west bank, and there's a big celebration. Their version of a ticker tape parade, right? Except there's no skyscrapers to throw, ticker tape down from. But and so David's decision is gracious, but it lays the seed for more trouble. There's something we have to keep in mind. If you don't deal with issues, the issues will deal with you. If you don't deal with issues, the issues will deal with you. It's very important. And so he doesn't properly deal with Joab. He's going to try to just slowly move him aside. Joab's not that type of guy, right? You're not just going to set him aside. He's going to Joab's great, you won the war, now get out of here. By the way, what a slap in the face to Joab, right? He just led the troops in a victorious battle, and he's going to be replaced by the enemy general? Wow. This is some real odd decisions. By the way, let me tell you something else, and this is important. Lest you have forgiveness, slights are never forgotten, they just simmer.